We are just a couple of days before Valentine's Day, and I didn't mention this early, but this episode is extra special because it is our 100th episode, which is very, very exciting.
Yes.
And with it being a couple of days before Valentine's, we're talking about our favorite topic over here, and that is sexual intimacy. And this is the specific topic that really did transform a lot of how I viewed sex early, well, not even early, 12 years into my marriage. It changed the game. And that is breaking down the box that we feel like we're supposed to, I'm using air quotes if you're not watching, supposed to be in when it comes to sex, and how we can break that box down to experience greater connection. So welcome to the Connection Codes podcast. This is the podcast where we break open the emotions that take us from being disconnected to connected in our relationships and in ourselves. I am your host, Tiara Wages, and joining me is marriage and family therapist, clinical sexologist, Dr. Glenn Hill, and his incredible wife, Phyllis Hill. And together, they have founded the Connection Codes, which is the guide to human connection. And we are so glad you're here.
Yes. Hello, world.
Welcome, friends. Oh my goodness. It's been a minute
Yes.
since we've been in the same location. We've been on Zoom with each other a lot. But yeah, so happy Valentine's Day, everyone. Woo, right there. That's a hot topic, right?
Yes.
Because there is so much disappointment that happens around Valentine's Day.
Which we have a Valentine's episode that we released last year that I will put into the show notes. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's that expectation. It's the what do I do to show my partner that I love them? And roses quadruple in price right now. And I mean, all the things, right? It's like, do I give chocolate when, she's already made it clear that she's trying to not eat chocolate? It just goes on and on. So yes, happy Valentine's Day.
Yes.
But yeah, we want to jump into the topic of the box. And it's interesting because Glenn and I get asked to talk about sex a good bit in different arenas. And that is one question that seems to always come up. And so we just go ahead and talk about it. Like,
Right.
We don't even wait for the question, because so many of us really do believe that there is a box. And I love the way you always say it. Like there's a board out there of judges who get to say, this is what is allowed in the box. And if you are a believer, then most of the time your box is even smaller. And it's just such an interesting topic. Like, who came up with that? And it is fascinating to me when you think about all other topics. Like when it comes to money, we all have different styles of how we manage our money.
Yeah.
And rarely does anyone feel like there's only one right way to manage your money. Or, how you feed your family. Like, we're all so different in how we feed our families. And rarely does someone go, no, there's only one right way to feed your family.
Yeah.
We can go on with topics, but man, when it comes to sex, it seems like, oh yeah, definitely. There's a small list of things that are okay to do. And that's what creates the box. And then we're so afraid of the box that we also have this mentality, I don't want to get anywhere near the edge of the box. I don't want to get anywhere near the walls of my box. So I'm going to stay right in the middle and I'm going to barely move.
Yeah, it's kind of a box inside of the box just to make sure, because we don't know, because there's no published, I always call it the International Board of Sexual Practices.
There you go. That's what it is.
That there are these very clear things that are allowed, but it's not actually written down, so we're not even sure. So you better be careful not to even get close to the edge of the box, because you might accidentally step over it. And I grew up with that. Again, it's not that somebody said it. It's not that it was written out, but it was very, very clear to me. And there are books that have been written about this. And I guess I should go back and just, as far as the background, this is my field. I've researched this for so many years. As far as I know, the first extant writings we have are from Clement of Alexandria, as far as from a faith-based perspective in the Christian world, that began putting limitations on sexuality in late 3rd into the 4th century. And by the time throughout his course of his lifetime, it ended up, I think it was 21 days a year that you were allowed to be involved sexually. Because it started out, you couldn't be involved sexually on the high holy days. And then it became more and more limiting. And then eventually it could only be on those few days and only when it was dark.
Mm.
And that just, for whatever reason, it's fascinating to me because I don't understand. I guess it's authority and church leadership and power and something I don't know, but I don't understand why the first thing he said, people didn't just laugh and go, that's silly.
Yeah.
And somehow it got traction and then it spread and spread and spread. And I believe that whatever that is, 1600 years later, we're still feeling the effects of it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that history of even how this has evolved over time. I think education, just like what you just shared, someone said this, and now we're experiencing the ripple effects centuries later, way long ago. And even just the messaging we receive as we're growing up. And I think it's because we don't talk about it. We get such few messaging in our childhood and in our teenage years, and definitely in our early marriage, that we don't even know what is expected of us. And we have so many emotions around sex, which we shared in our last episode. If you want to go listen to that, I recommend it. That it does it, even if culturally we're like, oh no, it is okay to do whatever we want. Internally, it doesn't feel like it's okay to do whatever we want. We feel so confined by our own restrictions and our own emotions. And this conversation is stemming because we've gotten a couple of emails about it recently. And someone had reached out and they were asking, my husband and I have discovered we really enjoy role play. Like, we are super into that, but we don't know if it's okay. And I don't think my friends are doing it. They must be better Christians than I am. So even like religiously, we feel like there's a certain standard and expectation. So it's interesting to know the history of what that stems
and
from.
even the wording that you say is it okay?
Yeah.
And our very first book, Sex and Marriage is Not Okay. The whole point of that was, I'm not saying it was even a great title. It's my idea. But,
Clickbait. That was early clickbait.
right. But the idea that, is it okay? Well, it has nothing to do with okay. Because for me, that's almost like saying, is it okay that I breathe X number of times today? Or do I need to curtail that? Do I need to monitor that? What? Just breathe. Breathe as many times as you need to. And at 8:30 tonight, I'm not going to go, well, Tira, sorry, you've met your quota for the day of breathing. So I don't know what to tell you, but so it's not an okay thing. It's just have fun. Just like with any activity. I don't care if you and Wes ever play tennis. I really don't care. Have you ever played tennis?
It's actually my dream to play tennis. Genuinely, that's my
Have you
dream.
ever played tennis together?
Yes.
Are you good?
No.
Okay. Well, anyway, so
That's
you
why
can
it's my
play tennis.
dream.
You can play tennis or you cannot play tennis. It makes zero difference at all. Bowling, if you play bridge, whatever it is, you can go play bingo. It doesn't matter. But we somehow miss that mentality with sexuality. That, oh, no. With sexuality, Tira, you're allowed to go bowling. You're not allowed to play tennis. And Wes and Tira would look at us like, what? How do you get to decide? I'm like, hey, I'm just telling you, bowling is acceptable. Playing bridge is acceptable. Going to play tennis is not. And you would just think that was absurd.
I want to go back to what you said about the breathing. And that really struck me. If there was a rule or a law that you could only breathe so many times in a day, we would be walking around paranoid, fearful, counting, distracted, worried,
And
full of
holding
fear.
our breath, which how much damage would that do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you think about that, if you talk about even with sex, how many of us are walking around kind of paralyzed by the topic, by what is okay, by even mentioning that someone emailed in and they're enjoying something,
Right.
role play, and yet there's fear that we're doing something wrong, or this will lead us to eventually, I guess, not believing there's a God or something. Like there's some kind of
Or that they're bad Christians.
yeah, like there's an attachment to that where so then you become so paranoid in the act, in the joy of the moment. Just like if that was the case with breathing, we would not just relax and breathe all day long like we do right now. We would be just so caught up in it.
Yeah.
But then there'd be those rebels who'd be like, I'm going to breathe the way I want to breathe and I'm not going to worry about it. But there are those rule followers who would be absolutely counting their breaths all day long, fearful of running out of breaths by the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I think, wow, as silly as that sounds with that analogy, But it is so true that what we have done, and when you follow it backwards, which I think I always appreciate about you, the research and the science, so that mind that you have, that you always want to know, where did this even start?
Yeah.
And to go back in history and go, oh wow, like we can actually see
Mm.
that in
Yeah.
history there were things put on this topic, like even that you can only have sex in the dark. It's like someone actually came up with that and it stuck. And people began to believe, yes, if there's any light out at all, then it's not godly anymore.
Yeah.
And so I know often when we work with pre-married couples, that's one question we ask is just kind of to know, well, I mean, we may not start off quite calling it a box. We try to be a little more, at least in that conversation, a little more generic so they don't even know they've created a box, but just what are your off limits? That's usually how we
Mm.
say it. And whenever they say whatever they say, we go, "Oh, where did you get that from? Where
Mm.
did you first hear that? Where did you learn that?" And so many of them go, "Well, I never thought of that." But they usually stop and begin to think.
Yeah.
And then,
Mm.
sure enough, someone will come up, like they'll come up with it. I know for us, I remember we went to Bible camp. That's how we met. And I remember one of the teachers, one of the I'm sure he was a counselor, a Bible teacher, had several responsibilities. And I remember standing around and we were teenagers, so I can visualize where we were standing, and it was a circle of us and him, and he was talking to all of us teenagers about that sex is only for procreation.
Wow.
And I mean, he was like full of knowledge. He wasn't just giving us like this little, well, here's my opinion. I mean, he was preaching it. He was teaching it. He was there to convince all of us that we would be fools to think otherwise.
Wow.
And it's like, how many of us have had those experiences in our past
Yeah.
where something was said and either in a preachy type way, like a real teaching type, you need to understand this, and this is why kind of conversation, or it may be a shaming thing, like a
Mm.
passing comment where it's just presented in a way that, of course, I should know this as an 8-year-old. And then there's this shaming put on it
Mm.
that then we carry way into our adulthood, but we can't quite figure out. I just know it's wrong.
Yeah.
I just know it is. And then if we ever can trace it back, many of us go, well, I do remember grandma that one time saying whatever, and I know I've shared this on the podcast, just different moments in my life. The very first time I ever put on makeup and I walked out and I remember my dad making such a derogatory comment and labeling it like, you look like a harlot. And I was, I think, 15 years old at that time.
Mhm.
The first time I tried mascara or blush or something. Like, I can still picture it. I can still picture myself walking out of the bathroom, and there's so much shaming in that.
Yeah.
It's like that message is, if you ever wear makeup, do know that you are labeled a harlot.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's what you are. And it's those kinds of things that are so damaging. But when you process the hurt in that, when you process to the end, when you can talk about that and go, wait a minute, I feel anger that my dad would ever say that to me. And that's not even true.
Yeah.
When a woman wears makeup, that does not label her a harlot.
Yeah, and I think these messages, because it is fascinating to me, and I guess there are other areas where we experience it the same way, but that someone can say something. One of our favorite, most horrible stories as far as sitting with a couple dealing with sexuality. A couple had been married, they had 5 children. I don't remember how long they'd been married, but they had never French kissed. And she remembered,
Mm.
and this is her memory of her childhood. She didn't document it, but she remembers being very young. She was in a Bible class. She thinks it was the pastor. She's certain it's a man. And the man said, "What business is it of yours to put your tongue in someone else's mouth?" And she thinks she was probably 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. All she could think of was being at a mall,
Mm.
running up to a total stranger and sticking your tongue in their mouth. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, duh, that's weird. So it completely cataloged in her mind that that's repulsive. That's just who would do that?
Yeah.
What a weird thing. And so she goes through her teenage years, dating, engaged, marriage, and her husband adored her. He just had always honored that, never
Mm.
really questioned it. To think that one comment
Mhm.
And I think in other areas, you might hear one comment, oh, well, tennis is stupid. But then there's, v- how do I say it? Voices, there's messages that counter.
Yeah.
So maybe you were told when you were 6, tennis is stupid, but then you had so many encounters with people who like tennis
Yeah.
that, and you talked about it, and then you start playing tennis. So then that, but with sex, there's such an
Mm.
incredible void. I mean, just
Wow.
Mhm.
dead
Yeah.
silence.
Mhm.
So this one sentence, this one
Mm.
voice,
Mm.
again, whatever, when somebody's 8 years old, well, there was never a countering
Yeah.
of that. And so that stuck
Wow.
because it is amazing to us. I mean, when we sit with couples and I always say, so where did you get that message? Where did
Mm.
you hear that? And, this fellow said, they're like, I'm not sure. And then they can't always pinpoint it and trace it. They got that message somewhere along the way and it always stuck
Yeah.
because they
Mhm.
never heard any other voices that said, oh my gosh, that's so silly. Which would have
Wow.
been awesome if this, woman who now is, a mature adult had heard a counter message 580 times,
Mm.
then that man's voice in the Sunday school class probably would have just disappeared and it
Yeah.
wouldn't even stuck with her at all. But because that's the only voice she'd ever heard, it's like, well, there you go. The Lord, and it is in a religious setting, so the Lord has spoken. This is the word of
Mhm.
God from on high. Therefore, we know that it's true. And
Mm.
so it has all this lasting effect because there's such a void of messaging otherwise.
Do you think that this issue is more of like a Christian issue? Like all the examples that we've given are
Right.
from hearing, picking up messaging in church settings. But do you think this is a society as a whole issue, or do you find it most common in the Christian sphere? I'm just
I
curious.
tend to think it's probably worse in the Christian sphere. I mean, there are other fundamentalist religious groups that I've sat with that experience the same. I experience it with secular people who aren't either religious at all or particularly religious. I'm just not sure, but that it resonates because it has
Mm,
permeated society. So I mean, I always think about in the United States, we don't eat roaches.
yeah.
Well, why not? I mean, there's tons of cultures that eat roaches and grasshoppers and crickets, and they don't have popcorn; they just saute up a bunch of crickets. Well, if I came to your house for a movie and you served, and you just handed me a bowl of
Cricket.
crickets, I'd be like, I don't. Well, why? Because everybody around me doesn't eat crickets,
Yeah.
so it's permeated our society. Even though I'm not in an anti-cricket eating club
Yeah.
or church or whatever,
Right.
but it's deep inside of me.
Yeah.
Could I eat crickets? Yes. I actually ate a roach once for $1 back in high school because I was very poor then. $1 meant something. So, uh, bu- but so I think it's not DNA level, but I think it's so woven into
Yeah.
our understanding. And what's fascinating to me is and I think the messaging has begun shifting the last few decades
Yeah.
that, well, God designed marriage and God designed sex, so it's a good thing. But be careful. And in every book that I've ever read, and there's some great books out there, but there's always a chapter that says, well, what's okay and what's not. So there
Mhm.
always has to be this, at least you throw that in there that, well, yeah, you should celebrate sex. It's great. Just be careful because there is a box. We're widening the box a little bit, but there is still a box. So you better be
Mm.
careful what that is. And again, our whole positioning is there's not a box, just have fun. Will Tira and Wes look a little different than somebody else? Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I don't care.
Mm.
They play tennis, bridge, and they go bowling. And this other couple would never go bowling. They hate bowling. Okay, great. I don't care. And there's no
Mhm.
rule. It's just a matter of what works for you and Wes and having fun in we call it sexual friendship, just being sexual friends and having fun together.
I think what you just said that really is sticking with me is that the fact that if you've heard one voice say it
Mm,
Mm.
and then all the rest are silent,
yep.
Yeah.
that one voice then becomes the loudest and the only.
Yeah.
And I think that as a society, not just Christian, I think as a society, we don't really talk about this.
Yeah.
And it's almost like there are other, podcasts out there where that's all they talk about. So
Mhm.
it's
Right.
not that there aren't now voices that you can tune into.
Yeah.
So, we are living in a time where you can hear more learn more, be aware of more. And, I think that and even one of the things you shared as far as where could this lead you?
Mm,
Like even going back to the role playing, like it's the where could this lead you?
mm,
And it's the putting like things into it where you're going, what do you mean where could this lead me? And it is so fascinating. Something that we hear a lot is kind of the people pull the porn card. Well, if it looks anything like porn, then it's wrong. And it's like, well, porn has everything, including
Mm.
sexual intercourse, including missionary position. So
yeah,
come on, that you can't throw that
You
card
have
in
to X
there.
everything out.
yeah,
Right. We
yeah,
would not ever go into that arena if
right.
we want to say, well, it could end up looking like or being like, and it's like,
Right.
wow, don't who's making that the you know,
Standard, yeah.
yeah, it's just like, wait a minute, that's not even fair to the whole conversation to say, "Ooh, ooh, ooh, be careful because it could lead." And,
Mhm.
and it's just I know specifically like with role playing, people have definitely asked that question. And it's just fascinating because we're totally fine, watching movies that we know are not real. Those are just actors. That's not a real thing.
And they're role playing.
And they're role playing, and we're totally great with that. Some of us have the favorites, like, oh, I watch all the Tom Cruise movies. And it's like, well, have you ever met him? Is he a nice person? Oh, it doesn't matter. He's a great
Yeah.
actor. And it's like, okay, so you enjoy his movies, but you're not basing it on what kind of person he is or what his belief system is or,
Yeah.
what the value of all that. And it's like we make exceptions over here, but then when it comes to our own intimate relationship, we're like, oh, just, somehow that just doesn't sound right.
Mm.
Mm,
That you're pretending to be other people in this encounter. And, and it's like it doesn't when you really play it all out, you lay all the cards out. It's like, oh, we love theater, but
Yeah.
yet in this arena, there's no theater allowed,
mm-mm.
you know.
I think the difference of those two things is that when you're, watching a movie of an actor or whatever, and you're not comparing your life to them, there's not emotion in it. But when it comes to sex, if we don't want to look like porn or a porn star, we've tied emotion to that. We've now tied shame or fear or, even the fear of it looking like that. And so we haven't processed that
Mhm.
emotion that is holding us back from then enjoying sex. If you can say, oh, what is this shame I'm feeling? I'm feeling shame that I look like a porn star right now.
Mm.
Ooh, okay, what is that trying to tell me?
Mm.
Okay, what do I do with that? Do I? No, I'm enjoying my husband. Like we haven't worked our way through to the
Right.
other side of that emotion. We just
Yeah.
we get hit with the shame, and when we can't identify what it feels like because we haven't been doing the core emotion wheel, we just feel gross. We just feel dirty, we feel yucky. So, okay, I'm just not going to participate because I feel dirty and yucky. But when you can actually pinpoint, oh, that's shame hitting for me when I think about doing this with my husband. Oh, but this is actually allowed. We're consensual. We're okay. We're safe. Okay, process that shame. And now you can
Right.
continue to move forward. And I think that that is where we get stuck sexually. And also that idea of we don't have those counter voices. So we don't have the
Right.
voices saying, yeah, it's okay. You can do that. As long as it's consensual, you go and have a great time. And I think that's a huge part of what the two of you are doing and what the three of us are doing on this podcast. I know a few episodes ago, y'all were sharing in the core emotion wheel and you shared about your sex date that you'd had the night before. Maybe one of you had like written something out or sticking to the script. I don't know what, but you like went into detail about your sex date. And I remember saying after of, okay, people that are listening, yeah, that may feel really weird to y'all that
Mm.
the two of you are describing your sex date so vulnerably with me just like sitting here hanging out. That goes against everything
Mhm.
society and culture tells us to do.
Yeah.
And so we are trying to add to those counterbalance voices
Right.
that people have so you can hear, and I needed this. I
Mhm.
remember watching Late Night for the first time, and I needed someone to say, no, it's okay to do these things.
Mhm.
And it's okay. you were giving ideas of things that y'all had done and things like that. And I was like, oh, I've never had someone counterbalance for me.
Right. Yeah.
I've never had someone share. So this is my first time hearing about a lot of possibilities sexually and opening that up.
So I understand what you're saying to yourself. I'm not fussing at the word, but even the fact, if I said to you, and you want to play tennis, and if I said, well, it's okay. It's okay if you go play tennis. You would look at me, I think you'd have a puzzled look like, what do you mean it's okay that I go play tennis? I'm like, well, I'm just saying it's allowed. It's okay if you want to do that. What? It's not okay. That's great. Go play tennis. Have fun. And maybe you stink at it. Maybe you get good at it. I don't know. I don't even care. Just have fun. It's fantastic. It's awesome. It's great. But that's very much our default is we're just like, is this okay?
Yeah.
No, it's not okay. I don't even know what word to put on it. It's great. It's fantastic. Just have fun. Go play tennis. Go bowling, whatever you want to do.
I know maybe we're not being specific enough, but I know for the listeners, right? You're going to have different things that pop into your mind that you're going, oh, no, 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 I know that's wrong. Or I've always been told that is role playing. That's a pretty big one,
Yeah.
or writing out a fantasy. It's like, oh my goodness, just the word fantasy. It's like, no,
Yeah,
somehow
I
that
didn't know
cannot
so.
be in the right or the righteous or the good girl top,
Mm.
And so it's like breaking it all down where it's like, wow, how did that ever become a bad? How did that ever become the rule? And I think about it, even with the idea that our bodies are a wonderland. Thanks, John Mayer, for that term. And it's like, but we have definitely sat with people where it's like, well, we can kiss each other and he can kiss my breast, but nothing below that. That is wrong. And it's kind of like, wow, can you imagine? For many of us, we put it back to God, like God would not be pleased. And it's like, really? God created this wonderland, this playground called our bodies, and all the different areas that are very sensual. And then to say, but no, 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 don't touch that. And no, 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 don't kiss that. And oh, no, no, no. And it's just like that. When you play it out, it's like, wait, that doesn't even make sense. Again, I think for us to go, yeah, where did I get that idea? Where to run it back? And sex toys is a topic that comes up a lot. And for some people, that is the danger. Oh, once you introduce sex toys, you're gonna, I don't know even how they finish the sentence, right? It's like, I'm gonna, what? Like, what do you think? And, and I
I'll
always,
tell you what you're going to do. Your brain is going to explode.
well, there you go. You will have amazing orgasms. How about that?
I don't know if you remember this, but this was pretty early on. We were in a pretty cultish church group, and I'm surprised we even got to that conversation, but it was with a pastor couple, and it's something we'd gotten a Polaroid, and so we were taking pictures. Does everybody know what Polaroids are? It's like,
yeah, they're still
trendy. They're still
Okay.
trendy.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
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 But I remember they were so concerned, and I remember him talking about it and saying, you do something like that, and the next thing you know, you've invited two couples to come in and be involved with you sexually. And I remember just yielding to him like, oh yeah, didn't even think about that. And now I look at it like, wait, what? That was a pretty good jump there from we're taking a picture of us playing, the two of us, and all of a sudden two other couples show up at the door. Well, we saw the flash of your Polaroid camera, so we just assumed you wanted us to come in and join. It's bizarre. But again, I just yielded to that. It was never within me to be able to go, what are you talking about? That's the most ridiculous jump. That's bizarre that your mind even goes there. But again, for many centuries, that's what has happened. There is a church council, and this is probably 1,600 years ago, but two priests who were married stood up at the council and argued, because the discussion was that the celibacy of the priesthood, we have tons of writing on this, the celibacy of the priesthood is superior spiritually, religiously, righteously, whatever, to marriage and sex and marriage. And two priests stood up and argued against it. They burned them at the stake. And now from where I sit, if I'm that dude's wife, I'm just going, dude, just agree with him. Just yield, because they're going to burn you at the stake. But I think that's how intense the messaging was. You're not even allowed to disagree. with this. You are not even, much less stand up and announce it. You must yield to this. And so, and I don't understand all the inner working. So I don't know. It's funky how that happens. But that's exactly what's happened there, is that there's just such an incredible inertia, whatever you want to call it, just the wave that's irresistible. And people have just been like, oh, yeah. I guess it sounds, even to this day, I think, and we saw with a couple this week that said, well, we just want to make sure. We just want to be careful and make sure that we're not going too far. And so it's very clear in their mind that there is a too far, and we're just going to make sure that we're, 15 feet away from too far. So then we know that we're acceptable to God, or we're not threatened with hellfire.
I know at some point we're going to run out of time. I think the flip side that we work with a lot is the damage, the incredible damage that is done when you limit yourself to a box.
Yeah.
And here's couples that we have worked with just in the past 6 months where they very much have had an active sex life, for them, a positive sex life, but it has consisted of vaginal intercourse only. And he developed some kind of problem where he no longer could participate in that. I don't know if it was cancer or something else. And they, even coming and talking about it was so huge for them, and so much sorrow, so much grief, because now they were not sexually active at all anymore. She was grieving incredibly, feeling so lonely, so rejected, missing so much the sexual connection. He was feeling so much guilt and shame because of his condition. And they never considered that there are other things you can do besides vaginal intercourse. And it was so heartbreaking. They've been married a long time, and it was like they really did actually have what seemed like a really positive sexual relationship, but now it was gone, 100% gone. And now really struggling in their relationship over this. And so when we broke it all down, trying to figure out even the idea, and it was amazing to see the layers come off, and then the tears begin to flow, because they'd been at this point struggling for, I don't know, if a solid year or two with no sexual interaction whatsoever. And I don't know if his condition even had, I don't know the future of that, like if it was going to ever get better. The way they talked, it was almost like no. And so we just have to accept this is, we'll be a celibate in a celibate marriage from now until we die. And it was just like, oh my goodness, guys, there's a huge playground out there. And you're not realizing it. You don't know that the playground is huge.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of sadness when we limit and we put ourselves in this box out of thinking this is the godly way. We're actually damaging ourselves and what could be.
Yeah.
I think we hear a lot of stories like that where it's because of the limit that there's actually disconnection, huge disconnection.
Right.
And, I know we've talked about this even as far as the female orgasm and things like that, going back to just sex toys. When you say, oh, no, sex toys are from the devil, or, they're wrong, or they're going to lead you into having an affair. There's so many, this is where it will lead you conversations. And it's like, why in the world would me using a vibrator lead me to having an affair? Like that is, my mind can't even wrap around that. Like that is so foreign to me, but those are arguments that are given. Well, and if I don't plan to ever have an affair. I'm never going to have an affair. So if someone says, well, you say that, but if you role play, you're going to end up having an affair. Or if you use a vibrator, you're going to end up having an affair. Well, then if I believe that person, then I'm going to go, oh,
Right.
And there's even the spiritual side of it. Well, God never intended, and I love the way you always say it. It's like, well, God didn't invent vibrators. Like, well, God didn't invent microwaves either, or automobiles or airplanes.
Yeah.
So
Or air conditioning.
maybe
Yeah.
we shouldn't have any of those things in
air
our life
conditioning.
as well.
Yeah, and we actually encourage couples when we're doing sexual coaching. And let me just say this: if you've not done the late night sexuality masterclass, you got to do it. You just have to, whatever it takes. You have to do this. And we talk about the X's of sex dates. The third X is expand your menu, expand your repertoire. We encourage couples, and we don't care. And we always say we're not going to be there. We're not going to buy the video. It doesn't matter to us what they do. But to go a month without having vaginal penetration, just expand your menu, get into variety, so that a month can go by and you're like, whoa, we've had the most amazing sexual connection this month. I don't think we ever put tab A in slot B. We forgot. And I love putting tab A in slot B. I'm not against that at all. But that's just one item on the menu. And I think culturally, that is the menu. That's it.
Yes. And I think that by doing that practice, it will actually increase your desire to do that.
Yeah.
I think often, at least my experience in marriage and other people that I've interacted with, that we become so, okay, I just got to do this thing.
Mm.
I'm just
Right.
going to do it because we're functioning inside of this box.
Yeah.
And so when we are actually now participating in sex, because we feel the weight of the box around us, we're tense,
Yeah.
we're analyzing everything, we're not experiencing joy, and therefore our bodies may not be performing the way we want them to. So now it's not even feeling good.
Yeah.
And so because of the pressure that we've put on ourselves. But if you can take away, okay, this is what we always do. We're not going to do it for a solid month.
Yeah. Just
And
for fun.
try
Just the
new things.
experimentation of it. Right.
It can actually bring the joy back. And when you release, that's one of the things I keep thinking. You said the word disconnect. Sex has become disconnecting for a lot of couples because they feel the pressure of what they're supposed to be doing inside that box.
Okay.
And when we can realize, oh, there's freedom in this, there's the ability to have a great time and to do what we want to, as long as we both agree, it can open things up tremendously to where now you're enjoying sex, which let me tell you changes everything.
Yeah.
The fact that I continued to have sex as often as I did for as many years as I
Oh my
did,
gosh.
that's a freaking miracle.
Yeah.
Like, good job, girl. I showed up.
Yeah.
But how painful was it for both of us? So much pain, so much disconnect, and so much harm done in our marriage because I was just showing up.
Yeah. And I mean, it's your experience, so that's great. But I do want couples, and it's probably more typically women than men, to not just show up.
Yeah.
I want them, and I don't know what you want to say, 6 weeks into their marriage going, okay, this isn't working. I
Yeah.
don't want her to go, well, whatever. I'm just going to show up for 8 years. And I always think about our relationship, and for either one of us, but if Phyllis early on had said, okay, and we're going to do an episode on core level anger soon. If Phyllis had core level anger that drove her to go, nope, we're not doing this.
Yeah.
We did this for 20 plus years. I think, oh my gosh, certainly the pain experienced in and of itself, but also the trauma.
Yeah.
And to this day, I mean, we're in our 60s. To this day, we are affected by the trauma response based on we just kind of accepted that this is the way it is.
Yeah.
And we needed, and again, I think typically it's going to be the female more than the male. We needed somebody to stand up and go, no, we're not doing this anymore. And I'm not going to just accept that, well, that's just the way it is. Now think about, does your family ever have hamburgers for dinner?
Yeah.
Do you like doing that?
When Wes cooks them good.
Okay. But if I said to you, from now on, you are only allowed to have hamburgers.
Oh, devastating.
Every meal.
Yeah.
And it didn't even matter what the meal is. It could be pizza. It could be your favorite meal ever. And I'm like, okay, this is your favorite meal. This is all you're ever allowed to. You'd be like, well, wait, what? I like that, but I don't want to have that every meal for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
There's phenomenal variety. And there may be a point at which, whatever that favorite meal is, you and Wes look at each other and go, oh, gracious, when's the last time it's been like 6 months since we've had that. And that's our favorite meal. I would love for the sexual menu to be the same way.
Yeah. I'm applauding myself for showing up,
Yeah,
even though it
I know.
totally was not fun.
Right.
But the freedom changes everything.
Yeah.
And now I'm not showing up out of obligation. I'm showing up out of joy. And that really, it affects one, the actual act of it, but our relationship is just so much deeper.
Right.
Yeah.
Last
night, Wes actually had a really difficult day yesterday, and we both have just kind of been struggling a little bit, just with some intensity and pressure. And he still is just like, man, I just love living life with you. Like, he loves me more today. And I know it's because our sexual relationship, that is a key component how much deeper and closer
Yeah.
we are, because now it's not just sex, now it's connection.
Yeah.
And we remove the box, you're not just having sex anymore, you're having
Right.
Wow.
connection. And that's
Wow.
two totally different things.
Sure.
I want to make one more point just as a reminder before we move into the core emotion wheel. Dr. Glenn, sex is designed for men, right?
That's what I've been told for
Mm.
many, many centuries. I'm that old. For centuries, I've been told. Yeah. And I would suggest probably since early AD that has been the message. Again, this was not just for the record. That was not the message of the Judeo culture. So it's not that it was always this way, and we won't have time to get into all that. But you know, again, get the late night masterclass, because that's one of the first things we cover. The first protocols is that sex is designed as a party for the female, and the male is invited. If you look at what happens anatomically, physiologically, biochemically, and psychosexually for the female versus the male, it's a universe difference. And we always say it's a buy one, get one free ticket, so he gets to show up for the party. So Wes is thrilled.
Yeah. He gets the goodie bag and has the cake.
Yes. And, and I always say if we go to a birthday party together, it's Susie's birthday. When it comes time to sing happy birthday, everybody knows it's Susie's birthday. We might have more fun at the party than Susie does because she's worried about parking and drinks. Is everybody, what's the temperature in the room? So it's not that the female's necessarily even going to always have more fun than the male, but the setup, the design of it is around. That doesn't mean you don't have quickies. You can certainly do that. But to have that mentality that, okay, we have to make this party so that she is having fun, that she's enjoying this party. And what we've done for many centuries is we're like, oh, no, it's for the male. It's just a chance for him to get his rocks off. She's just supposed to show up, be available, spread them, basically be a sperm receptacle. And I'm convinced, especially the last couple of years, I've just started notating some of this with couples. I think the vast majority of female sexual involvement in this culture, at least, the female disassociates.
Yeah.
And disassociates is the first cousin to schizophrenia. So we are asking, presenting, requiring our women to develop schizophrenia. That they are having a non-present experience.
Wow.
They're just supposed to, their bodies are supposed to be available, but they are not present. Their minds, their psyches are somewhere else. And that's just heartbreaking to think, oh my gosh, of all in 2023, of all the sexual encounters, heterosexual involvement, how much of that was the female actually present and how often was she disassociating? And I would suggest it's a really, really large number.
A scary number.
Oh,
Yeah. Very, very.
And then what's amazing is then the guy is just like, well, I don't understand why she's never initiating. She's never turned on. It's because she's not even present. She doesn't even exist sexually. I think it's an identity issue. She's not even I don't know how to say that any more emphatically. She just doesn't even exist sexually. This is just an opportunity for him to stick tab A in the slot B.
We've thrown a lot out today. I almost feel like this is kind of heavy. The reminder is that for you to search for freedom.
Yeah.
And freedom is not in that box. And you got to figure out what your box is. You got to have those conversations with each other and to kind of go, let's talk about our box. What box have we created? Many couples never have that conversation. They don't even acknowledge they have a box. They have rules for sure and taboos, and they are so afraid of it. But the conflict that happens in the conversation keeps them from it. So, we want you to be emotionally connected so you can have these conversations with the emotion attached to it. I feel fear saying this. I feel pain about this. I feel hurt when this happens. I feel anger that my, Bible class teacher ever taught me that. Like being able to put the emotion to it will open the conversation in a safe way where you can talk about what is in our box and where did we get that messaging.
Yeah.
And freedom is what was intended for this. This is the one unique relationship. The sexual friendship I have with Glenn is only us. It's no one else. And to have freedom in that allows us to have a lot of fun. And it's not by anyone else's standard or rules. It's us. It's our fun. And so that is what we are wanting for you as the listener. And to not, I don't want you panicking in this moment thinking, oh my word, I'm disassociating, so no more sex for us. That's not our goal. Our
Right.
goal is to lead you to freedom
Mm.
by identifying your box, by talking about that, by having that conversation, even acknowledging, yes, I disassociate a lot, talk about that, and to be able to start on this journey. And again, we've said it so many times, plugging the late night. I know we're going to have a Valentine special with that. You got to be emotionally connected. We stress that so much that you've got to start with the Connection Codes Foundation to be emotionally connected, so you have the language
Yeah.
to then go through the late night and be able to go, wow, okay, we've really missed it on this topic because we've never really talked about it, and people don't talk about it, and we're going to start talking about it.
Mhm.
And then to get to that freedom. And I love that about you and Wes, and just how open y'all are with how the Connection Codes radically
Right.
changed
Radically.
your sex life,
Mm.
and that it brought the freedom, and that brought the
Yeah.
fun.
Yes.
And now during hard times, like all the challenges of all the new things that y'all are involved in right now, it's like at the end of the day, Wes can still turn to you and go, I love living life with you.
Yeah.
And that is because you guys are
Mm.
emotionally and sexually connected.
1,000%.
Yeah, and I do want to add or reemphasize that one thing. I want to get people pissed off earlier, sooner. We taught at a marriage intensive a couple nights ago, and we got so many emails, so much feedback from people that said, we've never had a conversation like this. We've been married, whatever, 8 years, 15 years, 19 years. And they've never had a conversation about sex before. What? You've never had a conversation about dinner? Yeah, we've never discussed dinner. It's like, that doesn't make any sense. That's not possible. How can you not have this conversation? Because sex in marriage is a thing. It exists, even if it's not happening. It's an issue. So I want to get people pissed off, annoyed, bothered, so they have a voice much, 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 much earlier. You and Wes were way ahead of where we were. Took us freaking forever. We were the slow kids in the group. But so that literally 6 weeks in to their marriage, a couple's just like, okay, this isn't working. We're not going to tolerate this for another 8 years. And that's what the research shows, is that people get help about 7 years after disaster. 7 years. What? How many weeks is that? How many days? How many hours? How much pain is that in 7 years? We don't do it. You don't break your leg, and 7 years later, you're like, my leg's been hurting for 7 years. I think I probably should go see a doctor. I'd be like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
How's that possible that you waited 7 years? Well, I didn't overreact. So I want to get people upset early on. So again, I'm not trying to get them to bail on their relationship. I just want you to get pissed off. So you're like, okay, we're not doing this anymore. And that's, again, I think females need that to develop that voice more so typically in this culture than men. For the woman to go, nope. And again, it's not that I'm leaving you. It's not that I don't want to be with you. We're just not going to do this setup
Yeah.
anymore, because it is so important. And every time you're involved sexually where it's not working, where she disassociates, whatever, where you're just building on that trauma.
Yeah.
And now, whatever, it's going to take you an extra 10 years to fix this if you don't get help in it.
1,000%. So glad that you said that we are building on trauma if we don't get help. And Wes and I were ahead of y'all because we used the connection codes, because we did foundations, because we did late night, because we took these tools and we didn't just listen, we applied them, and it changed everything. And so now, if this is your first episode listening, well, welcome. You picked a good one. Welcome to number 100. But we are about to go into the core emotion wheel. And this is the tool that Dr. Glenn and Phyllis created so we can actually learn how to identify those emotions and process them out so we can connect with each other. So you can take this typically, I'm using air quotes, hard, awkward conversation around sex, and we're going to give you a script on how to have that conversation and connect with it.
Yeah.
So we're gonna show you what that looks like.
Yeah, because everybody wants this. They just don't have a clue
Totally.
how to do it. Okay, so let's do an issue-specific wheel on our sexual relationship.
Okay. Or just the topic of sex. How about that?
Sure. Okay.
Definitely feel a lot of anger. If you've heard any of our other podcasts, anger is a hard one for me, that core level anger, but really core level anger of the curse, the generational curse that I was handed.
Wow.
Being the youngest of 8 kids, no one talked to me. My parents didn't talk to me. My
Wow.
siblings didn't talk to me. No one talked to me. and I knew nothing. So a lot of anger about that, and I want to break the generational curse. We've got to all get on that. We've got to stop this.
Wow.
Um, shame, I think, shame is a big topic for me in sex. Just that it's the old voices. It's the old, and just society. I feel shame in how do I look, and how all of that as far as just when it comes to sex. Guilt that I easily get distracted, that I hurt you in this arena still to this day, that I'm not in tune. I easily get distracted, in this topic. Fear, I think there's times that I do have fear. I have fear a lot when we talk about sex. Just like the other night we spoke for a group, and I always feel fear that what are they hearing?
Wow.
And are we presenting freedom, or just are people leaving feeling more pressure? So I do feel fear that we're missing people. Lonely, I would say probably a double lonely. There's lonely in the fact that there's not very many people that speak about this topic. So it feels alone. I feel alone in it often. But I think there's times with you that I feel lonely because my experience and your experience are so different, and again, the difference of male and female. Like, you are so easily activated and I'm not, and my brakes and my accelerators are so different than
Right.
yours. So that feels lonely at times. Sad, I think there's a tremendous amount of sad that we have, the history that we have sexually. Like, it is and always will be our history. Like, all the trauma, all the pain of our early years, starting on our honeymoon. Let's see, I think I kind of combined my hurt when I was talking about earlier, just the missing there. The joy is that we are in a very different place sexually, and that we're able to have fun, and there's so much pleasure in it. And to be in our 60s and still have that vibrant sex life, I feel so much joy in that, for sure.
Wow. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me, I can't think about sex without thinking about you, and I can't think about you and sex without thinking about just flooded with joy. It blows my mind that, because I remember all of the pain and the
Yeah.
missings and the rejections and just
Yeah.
trauma,
Wow.
and the fact that this is possible. I'm faith based. I think God just redeemed it. It's like, whoa,
Yeah.
this is two different people. We have that marriage, and then we have this marriage,
Mhm.
sexual relationship. Now this one, it just blows my mind. A lot of anger, that so many different aspects. We talked about that some on this podcast. Just how did this happen? It just is maddening.
Mhm.
The most spectacular experience, and it's been curtailed. It's been crushed.
Wow.
It's been
Yeah.
knocked off course. It just pisses me off. It's like,
Mhm.
how, and that's the huge part of our driver. We have to change this. This is not an
Mhm.
option. Shame in that at times, because I mean, even the other night when we did the class with a big group, I'm thinking, are they judging us? Are they going, oh, they're just perverts? They're not
Mhm.
really godly. They're not
Wow.
really, I'm thinking, and I have no idea. There may have been zero
Wow.
people in the audience, feeling that way, but I do get hit with the fear of that, oh,
Yeah.
we're just, we're just weird and wrong,
Mhm.
bad, and we're leading people to damnation or whatever. And all of them are going to have affairs in the next, 3 weeks
Mhm.
because of what we presented. And then I get hit with guilt with that. It's like, we are doing good, aren't we? I think we are.
Mhm.
I hear testimonies continuously, but but I'm also hear the voices from religious leaders that
Wow.
are like, you can't do that, and we're told that literally personally by some people, but then just a general,
Wow.
presentation of it. So I get hit with guilt with that sometimes. A lot of loneliness in that. It's like, wow, there's not many voices out there, and there sure aren't many voices of couples in their 60s
Right.
who've been
Right.
together for decades, who can go, oh, this is a whole new world, is a whole different setup than what we've seen and what we've
Mhm.
experienced. And if people don't believe that's true, they can go to church on Sunday and just ask around. And sadness in that, it's like,
Mhm.
what a sad, sad atmosphere that we have established. Of course, we see that continuously with couples where
Yeah.
their sexual relationship is just sad, sad, sad.
Wow.
And then hurt. I'm hurt over that culturally, but of course we've also experienced so much hurt just between the two of
Mhm.
us that still affects us to this day. Now we know what to do with it, which is fantastic. But so much pain and residual pain and leftover pain, and the trauma effects from so much trauma over the years. But that brings me back to joy because wow, I just blown away.
Wow.
It's just so cool.
Thank you.
Love that. Thank you both so much for sharing. And if you would like to download a wheel for free so you can actually process this for yourself and with your spouse, with your partner, it is available in our show notes, and just download it. You can watch a video on how to do it so you actually connect using it. It's so powerful. And I want people that are listening, if you're saying, wow, I am stuck in a box and we are creating damage in our marriage, it is trickling from our sexual relationship, and we are one of the couples that Glenn, just would say sad, sad, sad. Like, I want you to know, one, it is not your fault. It is not your fault.
Absolutely.
And you are not alone. This is a epidemic in our society that stems back, as Glenn described, centuries ago of how it was set up. And we want you to experience the freedom and connection that you deserve. I highly recommend, we are doing a Valentine special right now, but even if you're listening months later, our Foundations and Late Night Masterclass, we have it in a bundle, and that is where you start. That is how you learn how to communicate. That's how you learn how to identify the shame and the fear firing in your body, how you can communicate to create safety. Because if you don't feel safe with each other, you might as well just stay in a box, because you have to have safety in order to connect vibrantly sexually. And then our late night is what guides you to that sexual connection. Great timing. So we do all of this because
You need this.
You deserve this.
So
So
let's
let's
do
do this.